The rooftop bar was buzzing with the kind of energy that comes from too much craft beer and too many people pretending their lives are Instagram-worthy. I should have known something was off when Sienna Clark kept glancing at me with that predatory smile she usually reserved for her social media posts. But hindsight's a cruel mistress, and I was about to get acquainted with her intimately. "Truth game!" someone shouted over the Portland skyline. And suddenly, we were all sitting in a circle like teenagers at summer camp. Except we were pushing 30, most of us had mortgages, and the stakes were about to get nuclear. My wife, Maribel, was practically glowing in the string lights someone had hung around the makeshift seating area. She lived for moments like this, surrounded by her influencer marketing friends, camera-ready even at 11 p.m., every gesture calculated for maximum social impact. I'd fallen in love with that confidence once. Now it just reminded me of a performance I couldn't afford tickets to anymore. "Cole," Sienna said, her voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. "Truth or dare?" I should have picked truth. Should have played it safe. But something in her tone made me reckless. "Dare." The words were barely out of my mouth when she moved. 1 second, she was sitting cross-legged on the opposite side of our little circle. The next, she was in my lap. Her hands framing my face, her lips pressed against mine with the kind of intensity that stops conversations mid-sentence. The kiss lasted maybe 3 seconds, long enough for my brain to short-circuit, long enough for someone to gasp, long enough for my wife to start screaming. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Maribel's voice cracked like a whip, high and sharp enough to cut glass. She was on her feet, trembling with rage, her carefully applied makeup starting to smudge around her eyes. "Sienna, what the hell?" But Sienna just smiled. Calm as a lake before a storm, she settled back into her spot and smoothed her dress like nothing had happened. "I only did what you did first, Mari." The silence that followed was the kind you feel in your bones. 20-something influencers, marketing managers, and assorted hangers-on, all frozen like someone had hit pause on reality. Even the Portland wind seemed to hold its breath. "What are you talking about?" Maribel's voice was smaller now, uncertain. Sienna pulled out her phone with the deliberate precision of a surgeon selecting a scalpel. "Should I start with the texts, or would you prefer the location logs? I've got months of material here." That's when I knew my marriage was over. Not because of the kiss. That was just theater. But because of the way Maribel's face went white, the way her hands started shaking, the way she looked at Sienna like she was staring down the barrel of a loaded gun. "You've been sleeping with Landon," Sienna continued, her voice never rising above conversational level. "My boyfriend Landon, for 4 months. Every Tuesday when you told Cole you were at yoga, every Thursday when you said you were working late. Should I keep going?" The phone screen glowed as she scrolled through what looked like screenshots, text messages, calendar entries, GPS coordinates that probably told a story I didn't want to hear. My brain was trying to process this information like a computer running too many programs at once. Maribel. Cheating. With Landon Walsh, the smug tech bro who owned a startup that probably did nothing but burn venture capital. The same Landon who'd been to our apartment for dinner parties, who'd shaken my hand and complimented my beer selection while apparently planning to screw my wife behind my back. I stood up. Not because I had a plan, but because sitting still felt impossible. The rooftop suddenly seemed too small, the air too thin. 20 pairs of eyes were watching me like I was the evening's entertainment. "Cole," Maribel started, but I was already walking away. Behind me, I could hear the explosion beginning, voices rising, accusations flying, the sound of Maribel's carefully constructed social world imploding in real time. But I kept walking until I reached the edge of the rooftop, where the city spread out below like a circuit board. My phone buzzed. A text from Jake Lyons, my old college roommate who ran a boxing gym downtown. "Saw the live stream. Holy shit, man, you okay?" Live stream. Of course someone had been filming. In Maribel's world, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen, which meant my humiliation was now permanently archived in the cloud. I turned around to find most of the party clustered around Sienna, who was holding court like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. Maribel stood alone at the edge of the group, mascara streaking down her cheeks, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered 4 months of Tuesday yoga classes and Thursday late nights, and the sympathy evaporated like morning fog. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from our shared Google Calendar. Maribel was apparently trying to delete something, but Google's revision history is forever. I opened the app and started scrolling through the past few months. There it was, a pattern hidden in plain sight. Yoga with Sarah every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Client dinner every Thursday at 8. Except now I could see the edit history, the original entries before she'd changed them. L. Riverside Hotel. Landon, his place. She hadn't even bothered to be creative about it. I screenshotted everything. The calendar entries, the revision history, the timestamps. Then I opened our shared Uber account and started scrolling through her ride history. Riverside Hotel, Landon's address in the Pearl District. Over and over, like a GPS record of betrayal. The evidence was all there, laid out in the digital breadcrumbs of modern life. My wife had been living a double life, and she'd been sloppy about it. Either she didn't think I was smart enough to figure it out, or she didn't care if I did. I was leaning toward the latter. Cole. Maribel's voice behind me, tentative and small. I didn't turn around. How long? I asked the city skyline. It's not what you think. How long, Maribel? A pause. Since March. March. We'd gone to Jake's birthday party in March. Maribel had spent the whole night complaining about how boring my friends were, how she felt like she was outgrowing our social circle. Apparently, she'd been growing into someone else's bed. Why? I turned around now, genuinely curious. She looked like a stranger standing there in her carefully chosen outfit, her influencer smile nowhere to be found. I don't know, she whispered. It just happened. Bullshit. The word came out harder than I'd intended. You planned it. You scheduled it. You lied about it for months. That's not something that just happens. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Good. I was going to tell you, she said. When? After you'd lined up your next victim? It's not like that. Then what's it like, Mari? Help me understand how my wife decides to start screwing her best friend's boyfriend and lies to my face about it for 4 months. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. For someone who made her living crafting perfect social media posts, she seemed remarkably short on words. Behind her, the party was breaking up. People were gathering their things, calling Ubers, suddenly very interested in being anywhere else. Sienna was still there, watching us with the satisfied expression of someone who just watched her favorite movie. We need to talk, Maribel said finally. No, I said, we really don't. I walked past her toward the exit, pulling out my phone as I went. First, I canceled our shared Netflix account, then Spotify, then our joint credit card. By the time I reached the elevator, I'd systematically dismantled the digital infrastructure of our relationship. The elevator doors opened, and Jake Lyons stepped out. 6'2" of former Golden Gloves champion, wearing a gym shirt and the kind of expression that suggested someone was about to have a very bad night. Where is he? Jake asked. Who? The man who's been involved with your wife and has no idea what's coming. I almost smiled. He's not here. And we're not doing anything stupid. Jake looked disappointed. You sure? Because I've got some thoughts about proper etiquette. Save it, I said, stepping into the elevator. I've got better ideas. The next morning, I called our landlord. Our lease was month to month, and I wanted out. Then I called my boss and asked about that remote position in Seattle they'd been trying to fill. Finally, I opened a new bank account and started the process of separating our finances. Maribel came home around noon, looking like she'd slept in her clothes. She found me in our bedroom, packing. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Seattle. There's a job opportunity. You can't just leave. Watch me." She sat down on the bed, careful not to disturb the clothes I was folding. "Can we please talk about this?" "What's to talk about? You made your choice. I'm making mine." "It was a mistake." I stopped packing and looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman I'd married 3 years ago, the woman I'd thought I'd spend my life with. She was still beautiful, still had that magnetic presence that had drawn me in at a coffee shop in Northwest Portland. But now I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the way she was already working out her next move. "Which part was the mistake?" I asked. "Sleeping with Landon or getting caught?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Sienna. We should talk. There's more you need to know." I showed Maribel the message. Her face went pale again. "What else is there, Mari?" "Nothing. Sienna's just trying to cause trouble." But her voice cracked on the word nothing, and I knew she was lying. Again. I texted Sienna back. "Coffee tomorrow, Pioneer Courthouse Square, 10 a.m. Then I went back to packing. Maribel sat there for another hour, occasionally trying to start conversations that went nowhere. Finally, she left to go stay with her sister. That evening, Jake came over with beer and Chinese takeout. We ate in silence for a while, watching the Portland rain streak down the windows of what used to be my home. "So what's the plan?" Jake asked finally. "Move to Seattle, start over, try to forget the last 3 years ever happened." "That's it? You're just going to let them win?" I looked at him. "What would you do?" Jake cracked his knuckles, a sound like small bones breaking. "I'd make sure they understood the consequences of their choices." "And then what? Get arrested? Lose my job? Give Maribel everything she needs to play the victim?" "Maybe. But you'd feel better." I considered this. Would I? Or would I just be a different kind of asshole? Jake shrugged. Sometimes being an asshole is the appropriate response. That night I lay awake in our bed, my bed now I supposed, thinking about consequences, about choices and payback and the kind of person I wanted to be when this was all over. Maribel had made me into a victim. Jake wanted me to become a villain. But maybe there was a third option. Maybe I could become something worse, someone who wins. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, typical Portland weather that matched my mood perfectly. I found Sienna at a corner table in the coffee shop overlooking Pioneer Courthouse Square, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread. She had the kind of calculated perfection that took hours to achieve, but was designed to look effortless. "Cole," she said, standing to give me a hug that felt like a performance. "Thanks for meeting me." I sat down across from her, noting the way she'd positioned herself with her back to the wall, facing the door. Either she was paranoid or strategic. Probably both. "What did you want to tell me?" I asked. Sienna smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "First, I want you to know that I'm sorry. About last night. About the way it all came out. You didn't deserve to find out like that. But you're not sorry you did it." "No," she said. "I'm not." She pulled out her phone and set it on the table between us. "There's something you need to understand about your wife, Cole. She's not who you think she is. I'm starting to figure that out." "Are you?" Sienna's fingers danced across her phone screen. "Because what happened with Landon? That's not the first time." My coffee suddenly tasted like ash. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Maribel has a pattern. She finds men in relationships, seduces them, enjoys the drama, then moves on when things get complicated. Landon is just the latest." She turned her phone toward me. The screen showed a series of text messages, timestamps going back over a year, conversations between Maribel and someone named David, then Marcus, then someone called Tech Bro Ryan. She keeps trophies, Sienna explained, screenshots of their conversations, photos they sent her, little souvenirs of her conquests. She thinks it makes her powerful. I scrolled through the messages, my stomach turning. These weren't the desperate communications of someone having an affair. They were calculated, manipulative. Maribel was playing these men like a video game, collecting points and moving to the next level. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because she destroyed my relationship with Landon, and she's done it to other women too. Because she thinks she's untouchable." Sienna's voice was steady, but I could see the anger burning behind her eyes. "And because I think you're the kind of man who might be able to do something about it." "Like what?" "Like make sure everyone knows who she really is." I stared at the phone screen, at the evidence of my wife's systematic betrayal of not just me, but multiple relationships, multiple families. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was a hobby. "How long have you known?" I asked. "About Landon?" "I suspected for months, but I only got proof recently." "About the others?" "I started digging after I found the first messages. Maribel's not as careful as she thinks she is." "And you waited until last night to do anything about it?" Sienna's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "I wanted to do it publicly. I wanted her to feel the same humiliation she's put other women through. And I wanted to make sure she couldn't spin it, couldn't play the victim. I had to admire the strategy, even as it made my skin crawl. Sienna had orchestrated the entire evening, turned Maribel's own social media obsession against her, made sure the evidence was undeniable and the audience was perfect. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Help me finish this. Help me make sure she faces real consequences, not just social media drama that'll blow over in a week." I thought about Maribel, probably at her sister's house right now, already working on her comeback story. The wronged wife whose marriage fell apart, who made one tiny mistake and was being crucified for it. She'd have sympathy, support, a new narrative by the end of the week, unless someone made sure she didn't. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. Sienna leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been documenting everything. Not just the affairs, but the lies she's told clients, the fake engagement numbers, the brand partnerships she's violated. I've got enough to destroy her career, but I need someone on the inside to help me do it right. Someone with access to her accounts. Someone with access to her accounts." I looked out the window at the gray Portland morning, at the people hurrying past with their heads down against the rain. Normal people living normal lives, not sitting in coffee shops plotting revenge against their cheating spouses. But then again, normal people's wives didn't keep digital trophies of their affairs. "I'll think about it," I said. Sienna nodded, sliding a piece of paper across the table. "My number. When you're ready." I walked home through the rain, my mind churning. By the time I reached our apartment building, I'd made my decision. But first, I had a phone call to make. "Jake, it's me. Remember what you said about consequences?" "Yeah. I'm ready to have that conversation." An hour later, Jake was sitting in my living room, listening to everything Sienna had told me. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "So what's the plan?" he asked finally. "We're going to give Maribel exactly what she's been giving everyone else," I said. "A taste of her own medicine." "I'm listening." I pulled out my laptop and opened Maribel's social media accounts. She'd never bothered to change the passwords, probably because she never thought I'd care enough to look. Big mistake. First, we document everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every fake engagement metric. Then we package it up and send it to every brand she's ever worked with. That'll destroy her career. That's the point, but we're not stopping there. I opened her email account, scrolling through months of communications with clients, brands, and other influencers. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Fake follower purchases, manipulated engagement rates, undisclosed paid partnerships that violated FTC guidelines. Jesus, Jake muttered, reading over my shoulder. She's been running a scam operation. Gets better. Look at this. I showed him a series of emails between Maribel and a competitor, discussing ways to sabotage other influencers' campaigns. Character assassination disguised as market strategy. She's been destroying other people's careers for years, I said. Time to return the favor. We spent the next 3 hours building a comprehensive file. Screenshots, email chains, financial records showing the fake follower purchases. By the time we were done, we had enough evidence to end not just Maribel's career, but potentially land her in legal trouble for fraud. This is nuclear, Jake said, scrolling through our compiled evidence. You sure you want to go this far? I thought about the text messages Sienna had shown me, about the other men Maribel had seduced, the other relationships she'd destroyed for sport, about the way she'd looked at me in our bedroom, already calculating her next move. She made her choice, I said. Now I'm making mine. The next morning, I started sending emails. First to the brands Maribel had defrauded with fake engagement numbers, then to the FTC, reporting her undisclosed paid partnerships. Finally, to the competitors she'd tried to sabotage, giving them everything they needed to pursue legal action. By noon, my phone was ringing. Cole? Maribel's voice was shaky, desperate. What did you do? I cleaned house, I said. Found some interesting things in your email account. You can't do this. Those are private communications. Nothing's private when you're committing fraud, Mari. Ask the FTC. You're destroying my life. No, I said. I'm just making sure everyone knows who you really are. She hung up. 5 minutes later, she was at my door, pounding on it like the building was on fire. Open up, she screamed. We need to talk. I opened the door to find her looking like she'd been hit by a truck, hair disheveled, makeup smeared, wearing the same clothes from yesterday. Behind her stood Landon Walsh, looking equally desperate. Well, I said, if it isn't the happy couple. You need to call those brands back, Landon said, trying to push past me into the apartment. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding. I didn't move. Or what? Or we'll sue you for defamation. I laughed. Actually laughed. With what evidence? Everything I sent them came from Maribel's own accounts, her own emails, her own fraud. It's not fraud, Maribel said, but her voice lacked conviction. Buying fake followers isn't fraud? Lying about engagement rates isn't fraud? Not disclosing paid partnerships isn't fraud? I pulled out my phone and showed them a screenshot of an FTC webpage. Because the Federal Trade Commission disagrees. Landon's face went white. FTC? Oh, did Mari not mention that part? Yeah, I reported her to the feds. Turns out they take influencer fraud pretty seriously these days. Maribel sank down onto the hallway floor, her back against the wall. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married, vulnerable and human. Then she looked up at me with pure hatred. You bastard, she whispered. You destroyed everything. Everything you built on lies, I corrected. I just told the truth. The truth? She laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. You want to talk about truth? You were boring, Cole. Boring and predictable and going nowhere. I was suffocating in this relationship. So you decided to cheat instead of just leaving. I decided to feel alive again. By destroying other people's relationships for fun? Her face crumpled. It wasn't supposed to be like this. No, I said. It was supposed to be secret. You were supposed to get away with it forever, keep collecting your trophies and ruining lives. But you got sloppy, and now you're facing consequences. I looked at Landon, who was staring at his phone with growing panic. Let me guess. Your startup's investors are having second thoughts about being associated with an FTC investigation? He didn't answer, but his expression said everything. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're both going to leave. You're going to deal with the mess you made, and you're never going to contact me again. Cole, please. Maribel said, struggling to her feet. "We can fix this." "No," I said. "We can't, because there is no we anymore. There probably never was." I stepped back into the apartment and closed the door. Through the peephole, I watched them stand there for another minute before finally walking away. My phone buzzed with a text from Sienna. "Saw the news. Well played." Another text, this one from Jake. "Drinks tonight? I'm buying." And then one more, from an unknown number. "This is David Martinez. I think we need to talk. I saw what happened with your wife, and I have information you might find interesting." I stared at that last message for a long moment. David, one of the names from Sienna's screenshots, one of Maribel's previous victims. Apparently, word was spreading through her network of destroyed relationships. I texted back, "Coffee tomorrow. Same place, same time." Because if Maribel thought this was over, she was about to learn otherwise. I was just getting started. The next few days passed in a blur of phone calls, emails, and meetings with lawyers. Maribel's career imploded spectacularly. Brands dropped her, agencies blacklisted her, and the FTC opened a formal investigation. The influencer community, always hungry for drama, turned on her with the viciousness of sharks. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. David Martinez turned out to be a software engineer whose marriage Maribel had destroyed 2 years earlier. He brought documentation of her methods, her patterns, her systematic approach to seduction and manipulation. More importantly, he brought contacts, other victims, other men and women whose lives she'd derailed for sport. By the end of the week, we had a network, a support group of sorts, united by shared experience and a common goal, making sure Maribel Turner never hurt anyone else again. "She's like a virus," David said during one of our coffee meetings. "She infects relationships, destroys them from the inside, then moves on to the next host." "So we quarantine her," I said. "Make sure everyone knows what she is." "How?" I smiled. "Leave that to me." The plan came together over the weekend. Maribel's birthday was the following Tuesday, and she'd been planning a big party for months, a networking event disguised as a celebration, designed to rebuild her image and launch her comeback. She'd sent the invitations before her world fell apart, so most people probably didn't know about her recent troubles. It was going to be a room full of potential victims, all gathered in one place. Perfect. I called the venue, a trendy rooftop bar in the Pearl District, and spoke to the manager. Told him I was Maribel's husband, that I wanted to surprise her with a special video presentation. Something romantic and heartfelt to show how much I loved her. He was happy to help, even gave me the access codes for their AV system. Monday night, I sat in my empty apartment, putting the finishing touches on my masterpiece. A video compilation of everything we'd gathered, Maribel's text messages with her various lovers, screenshots of her fake engagement purchases, email chains showing her sabotage campaigns, audio recordings of phone calls where she bragged about her conquests, 20 minutes of pure, undiluted truth. I uploaded it to the venue's system, scheduled it to play at 8 p.m. sharp, right when Maribel would be giving her speech about resilience and comeback stories. Tuesday evening, I positioned myself across the street from the venue, in the window of a coffee shop with a clear view of the rooftop bar. Jake sat beside me, eating a sandwich and watching the entrance. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Too late for second thoughts now?" At 7:45, I saw Maribel arrive in an Uber, wearing a stunning red dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked confident, radiant, like a woman ready to reclaim her throne. At 8:00 p.m. exactly, the screaming started. Even from across the street, we could hear it. Voices raised in shock, anger, disgust. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the rooftop bar, I could see people pointing at the screens, pulling out their phones, backing away from Maribel like she was radioactive. "Jesus," Jake muttered. "That's brutal." I watched Maribel try to reach the AV controls, but the crowd was in chaos. People were filming everything, live streaming the meltdown to their own social media accounts. Within minutes, Der Maribel Exposed was trending on Twitter. My phone buzzed with a call from Sienna. "Holy shit, Cole. Are you watching this? Front row seat." She just ran out of the party crying. "Half the people there are calling lawyers, the other half are calling reporters. You've destroyed her." I watched the entrance to the building, waiting. A few minutes later, Maribel burst through the doors onto the sidewalk, stumbling in her heels, her perfect makeup ruined by tears. She looked around wildly, probably searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Then she looked up and saw me in the coffee shop window. Our eyes met across the street, and for a moment, time stopped. She stood there in her red dress, surrounded by the wreckage of her life, staring at the man she'd underestimated. The boring, predictable husband who'd turned out to be anything but. I raised my coffee cup in a mock toast. She flipped me off and stumbled away into the Portland night. "So what now?" Jake asked. I finished my coffee and stood up. "Now I go to Seattle. Start over. Try to remember what it feels like to be a good person." "Any regrets?" I thought about it. About the woman I'd married, the life we'd built, the future we'd planned. About the choice between being a victim and being a villain, and the third option I'd found somewhere in between. "Ask me in a year," I said. But as I walked back to my apartment through the rain-soaked streets of Portland, I knew the answer already. Maribel had made me into something I'd never planned to be. Someone capable of calculated revenge, systematic destruction, heartless payback. She'd created her own nemesis, and now she'd have to live with the consequences. Just like I'd have to live with what I'd become. The apartment felt different when I walked in. Emptier, but also cleaner somehow. Like I'd finally swept out all the lies and deception that had been accumulating in the corners. My bags were packed, my new life waiting in Seattle. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat down at my laptop to check the news. Maribel Exposed was still trending. The video had been downloaded thousands of times before the venue's staff could shut it down. News outlets were picking up the story. The FTC investigation was front-page news in the business section. Maribel Turner, influencer and serial relationship destroyer, was finished. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? This is Channel 8 News. We'd like to speak with you about your wife's activities." I hung up. Then I turned off the phone, finished my whiskey, and went to bed. Tomorrow, I'd drive to Seattle and start becoming someone new. Someone who'd learned the difference between justice and revenge, even if the line was thinner than I'd expected. But tonight, I was still the villain Maribel had made me, and I was okay with that.